last wish. Please tell us about Marlee and her dreams.
Yeah, Marlee was what you would think of as a typical 8-year-old before she was diagnosed. She was diagnosed when she was 8, but she played soccer, a lot of soccer. She was obsessed with soccer. So one of her dreams was to become a professional soccer player. You can see the jerseys behind her, some of her heroes. She also loved sea turtles, and so somehow she was going to be both a professional soccer player and a marine biologist at the same time. So those were really her two big dreams, and then it changed after she diagnosed. She got into archery, and she was actually on track and with the junior Olympic archery team, and she was right at the point where she needed to make a decision if she wanted to go down the Special Olympic route because she did have a prosthesis, or the regular Olympic route, and she was really torn between the two because she wanted to show other people with physical challenges they could do it, and then she also wanted to go down the regular Olympic route and show people with challenges that they could compete with people who don't have those kind of same physical challenges. So, but her disease took a turn for the worse before she made that decision. But when she got into something, she was all in.
She had a lot of ambition, it sounds like, and drive, and was very achievement oriented and big dreams. And yeah. So from the time she was diagnosed to her passing, you said about 4 years, she had a really dramatic treatment journey. Most people have never had to love a child through such an experience. Would you tell us, please, what that journey was like for Marlee? And also, please, what is alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma?
We'll start with that one. Rhabdomyosarcoma is a very aggressive soft tissue cancer. It developed in her left foot. There are two forms of it, embryonal and alveolar. Alveolar tends to be more aggressive, tends to start in the extremities, the hands or the feet. But it's a very tough cancer to treat. It gets very little research because it is so rare. It's literally 1 in a million. 1 in a million kids will get arms. A much easier way to say it is arms. And when she started, she was playing soccer and she had a little bump on the top of her left foot. We didn't really think a lot about it. She probably hurt her foot playing soccer, kicking the ball. And it wasn't a big bump. Eventually, my wife took her to her pediatrician, who said, looks like it's probably a cyst or something. Let's just watch it. Because pediatricians cancer's not the first thing they think because they don't see a lot of it. So I don't blame the physician at all. But my wife did say, well, would you at least refer us to a pediatric orthopedic surgeon to look at it? And she did. And on April 15th, we all cancer parents remember lots of dates. April 15th of 2015, she was scheduled to have an MRI at 10:30 that morning. It was a Friday. I took off work that day, really kind of as an excuse to take off work. I wasn't expecting it to be a big deal. We thought she's either injured her foot or it is a cyst, or never imagined it was going to be a serious cancer. And so we finished the MRI, we went to lunch. As soon as we sat down to lunch, Shelly's phone rang, and it was a pediatric oncologic orthopedic surgeon at Colorado Children's Hospital. And he asked if we could come to his office at 2:30 that afternoon, which is 2 hours away. And 2 hours from the time he called, and you don't have to be in healthcare to know that's not the way you get results. So, you don't get results in an hour and a half from an MRI under normal circumstances. And so we were already pretty freaked out. We get there on a Friday afternoon, talk with him. He showed us the scans. It was actually a tumor, a much bigger tumor growing from the bottom of her foot. So we were kind of seeing the tip of the iceberg. And then after many biopsies, it was determined it was localized. It was only in her foot. It had not metastasized or spread to the rest of her body. So that was a positive thing. It gave us some hope. But 2 weeks later, about 10 days later, she had her left foot amputated. 2 weeks after that, she started 43 weeks of intense outpatient chemo. which was made for a very long, challenging year, both for her and our family, and her sister. Her sister was 13 years old when Marlee was diagnosed. And so we tried really hard to balance between the two, taking care of Marlee, who had to have almost all the attention, but still making sure that Meredith got the attention she needed. You know, we made a promise to Meredith that at least one of us would always be at her school functions or any other functions she had. But there were still times she had to be brought home by someone who was her parents. It was a friend's parent or a neighbor. And so she grew up in Marlee's shadow, which is a part of just the whole sibling journey that goes along with the child who has cancer. So at the end of that first year at Colorado Children's, she was in remission. We moved back to Texas to be closer to family. She relapsed for the first of 3 times, almost right after we moved back to Texas, to Houston. And so she was at MD Anderson being treated then. And she went through a pretty significant treatment series, because the first year, as you know, there's a COG protocol, and that's pretty much what she got at Colorado Children's. She would have gotten that at any good sarcoma center, and Colorado Children's is fantastic. After that, it's kind of a judgment call. It's, what do we try next, kind of thing, every time she relapsed. And on her second relapse, she also was enrolled in a CAR T cell therapy trial. This was pretty early on in immunotherapy. They were trying to have targeted therapies, but it was really hard to find a marker or a target that cells knew to go to the cancer cells. And they would look for proteins that maybe a cancer cell would emit more than a normal cell. But it was kind of generic. They couldn't identify those markers yet. And I want to talk more about that and some of the research that we are funding related to that. But throughout Marlee's treatment, it was horrendous treatment. I mean, she got 30-year-old drugs. She got doxorubicin, the red devil, that you can only get so much of it because it'll cause congestive heart failure and other things. It was developed from nerve gas from World War II, and horrendous side effects. It's red. That's why they call it the red devil. It would make her tears red when she cried. Her urine would be red, and she would have serious nausea and horrendous side effects. But she did smile through it all. I mean, and that's where the name comes from, Marlee's smile. And she was always outwardly focused throughout her journey. She got a lot of treatment in the Texas Medical Center at MD Anderson. And so my wife made lots of trips between the two, and I happened to work in the med center. And so I could walk over to MD Anderson and meet him for treatments or just office visits. And she would always make my wife stop and buy donuts for the homeless people, and they would stop and give them to homeless people. And so she was always outwardly focused, even when she was suffering and in pain. And I think she just recognized that in other people, that I'm not the only one suffering. And she never thought she got the short end of the stick. She never asked why me. She just dealt with each bad news as it came. And unfortunately, most of her journey was bad news. Most of her relapses, and then finally, when it came back with a vengeance, which ours tends to do at some point, and we knew it was only palliative care, she kept going. And then when we were told that it was no longer working, that it was no longer shrinking the tumors were getting bigger. She had one tumor wrapped around her liver, the artery to her liver, and her PA. And it was actually kind of weird, because she had clear scans a week before, and then she started having some symptoms of pain, and her urine was a weird color, and it just was strange. So brought her back in, and I remember this day really well too. I was sitting in a meeting. My wife called me and said, "You need to meet me at MD Anderson." So I walked over, and I didn't go back in my office until probably a month or so after she died. I've had great employers throughout the journey, all of them that I've worked for have been extremely compassionate to our family and to Marlee. But when they did the scans and we came back, we brought Marlee with us and also a friend in case Marlee didn't want to go in and talk about the results of these scans because we knew they were going to be bad. And so I told her PA, who is one of our heroes, call me in the waiting room and tell me if it's going to be bad, and then I'll talk to Marlee about whether she wants to come in. And she called me, said it's bad. And so I asked Marlee, do you want to go in and talk to him about it, or you just want you or your mom to? And she said, no, I want to go in. And she's 12 now. And they explained it to her that the chemo's not working anymore. We really don't have any other options, except there is one trial we have found that will accept you. And she asked 2 questions. She said, do I get more chemo? And he said, yeah. And she said, will it cure me? And he said, most likely not. And she said, then I don't want any more. I'm done. I don't want to do any more. And we left there, drove to the beach, rented a beach house, and stayed there a week. And we had a gift of a great week. She felt really good that week. We did a lot of stuff. Came home after that week, and she was on hospice for a month or so before she eventually passed away.
What you've been describing, Bill, is something that would be so difficult for anybody to navigate. And to think of a 12-year-old to have that, to be so self-aware, so sure of what was right for her, to have the confidence and the courage to make such a decision. And then for you as parents, for you and Shelley to be able to hear that and support that decision when everything in your being would be naturally oriented towards fighting, because you want to just keep her here as long as possible. But to understand the difficulty of such a treatment is, that was incredible on your part as parents, and I think rare and hard to do because
I think it's probably rare for a 12-year-old to be so sure about that decision that
right.
She had no doubts that if that was the way it was going to be, more of what I've had for the last 4 years, I have no interest in doing it anymore. And Shelley and I were in the same place. Marlee had gotten to the point where she was really in a lot more pain than she had been before, and her quality of life was going down. She didn't want to live getting any more chemo, and she totally accepted that and was very sure of her decision. And Shelley and I just looked at each other like, good, she made the right decision. But like you said, it's natural for parents to want to do everything possible and keep going. But at some point, especially with cancer and the treatments we have today for pediatric cancer, it's almost torture when they get to that point, and just pouring more and more poison into their body when they're really sick doesn't do any good for anyone when we know that the end result is going to be the same. And the suffering just has to end. And thankfully it was her decision and we supported it.
I've heard physicians describe it as what we're doing to kids to try to save them is often very barbaric.
Oh, and no doubt about it. No doubt about it. She had radiation, she had chemo, she had her foot amputated. And that's one thing that's driven her, Shelley and I, to really focus on research and finding less toxic, better treatments, eventually, hopefully, a cure, and not kids, so kids don't have to go through that when they have cancer.
So through all of this epic battle, Marlee was smiling, and that has certainly created the name of the foundation that now works in her memory. But tell us about the mission of that organization. You've hinted at some aspects of it. Was Marlee part of kind of framing that mission, and how did it come to be?
Absolutely. When she was getting her treatment here in Colorado the first year, she got her Make-A-Wish from Make-A-Wish, Colorado. Um, and she couldn't decide what she wanted to do. And we were pushing her and pushing her. Okay, you love sea turtles. You want to go to Hawaii. You can do anything you want to do. You can meet anyone you want to meet. And she couldn't make a decision. And we pushed her and pushed her and pushed her. And Make-A-Wish was starting to push us. It's like, we've got to start planning this. And so she needs to make a decision. And one day she finally just told us, she said, you know, if I've got to think about it this hard, I don't think I need a wish. What I really want to do is set up a Build-A-Bear workshop at Colorado Children's so the other kids with cancer can come down and make bears too. And she, in one of her television interviews, she was a little star for a while when she was here. She answered the question of, why did you want to give bears to kids with cancer? And she said, well, I know what it felt like or feels like to be sick in the hospital, and a bear always made me feel better. And that day was magical. They set up the workshop. Kids got to come down, and they all left smiling. And we weren't supposed to, but we snuck up on the oncology floor, and Marlee had her wagon full of bears and was able to pass a few more out on the oncology floor for the kids who couldn't come down to the workshop. And it was really a magical day. It was fantastic. The kids were so excited. So our mission came from that. When Marlee was on hospice, probably 2 weeks before she passed away or so, Shelley and I talked to her and said, we're thinking we want to start a foundation in your name, and we want to give bears to kids with cancer. And she was shaking her head, could tell she was thinking, oh gosh, she's not going to agree with us. But she said, no, I like the bears, but I also want you to cure my cancer. I don't want anyone else to go through what I've been through. And so that's how our mission came to be. And our mission is to change the lives of kids with cancer one smile at a time. And we serve that mission in 2 ways. One is to give custom Build-A-Bears to kids with cancer and their siblings, and also to fund targeted research for rhabdomyosarcoma, or at least pediatric sarcomas, because they're so woefully underfunded, the research is.
Well, Make-A-Wish does such a great job helping kids realize their dreams and their wishes and so forth. And I hope that Build-A-Bear is very much a partner in helping you honor Marlee in this way, because it's beautiful. And God knows she's certainly a boon to a bear parenting. But you said something interesting I'd like to hear more about. Why was it important to Marlee that siblings, you intimated it earlier about Meredith and the commitments you and Shelley made to Meredith when Marlee started treatment, but I would imagine all of that ties together and why Marlee Smile is now giving bears to siblings of kids with cancer.
Absolutely. And I'm sure Marlee spent a lot of time in the hospitals, both here and in Texas, and different organizations would come in. They might give jewelry to kids. They could go down and pick stuff out and come back up, or it may be stuffed animals. She always asked if she could have an extra one for her sister. So she was always thinking about Meredith, and she was more worried about Meredith than she was herself. And she had a chaplain come in and pray with her at Colorado Children's, and she asked, or maybe it was MD Anderson, I can't remember exactly when it was, but here's Marlee laying in the bed getting chemo, feeling really bad, and was asked, what would you like for me to pray for you? And she said, I want you to pray for my sister because she gets migraines. And that, like, even then she was thinking outside of herself. She didn't want a prayer for herself. She wanted a prayer for her sister. And it's so often the siblings are left out, not intentionally, but it's inevitable.
Right.
There is so much attention that's required to take care of a really sick child, whether it's cancer or another disease. It's hard to give that much attention to the sibling as well. And Meredith being 13, she was diagnosed. So 17 when she passed away. Those are formative years where she watched her sister slowly die, basically. And she was always known as Marlee's sister. And I think one of her goals when she went to college, she's in her second year of college, is to become Meredith and not Marlee's sister, which is great. I mean, it doesn't mean she loves her sister any less than she ever did, but it's hard for siblings. And so that's one reason Marlee was pretty adamant about it. A really good friend of mine who has a great foundation in Houston that I was lucky enough to be on the board of, Shelter for Cancer Families, also had a conversation with me about it as we were starting our foundation, and said, would you please not forget about siblings? And they provide housing for families to come to Houston for cancer treatment, and they always make sure the siblings get as much attention as the kids with cancer do. And so that was another piece of the puzzle, is that, yeah, we have to do that. We have to make sure that siblings are involved.
I think, kids with cancer who are fortunate to survive often talk about they don't want to be defined by their cancer throughout their life.
Yeah.
And certainly siblings don't want to be defined by their family's journey either. It's part of their story, but they don't want it to be the story.
Exactly.
Right. For those in our audience just joining us, we're speaking with Bill Pack, president of Marlee Smile, which aims to change the world for kids with cancer one smile at a time. Bill, you shared that part of your mission is to support research too, because Marlee didn't want other kids to have to go through everything that she did. What do you find challenging about raising funds for pediatric cancer research and granting the funds effectively to research that will actually make a difference?
Sure. It's tough raising funds for childhood cancer research, or any kind of research, I would assume, because it's not tangible. It's not like the bears. It's probably easier to raise money to buy bears and give to kids, because it's a tangible thing. You have the bear, you hand it to a kid, and you see the smile, you see their face light up, and people who donated feel that. It's that instant gratification of you put a smile on a kid's face right now with that dollar. But $1 for research, there is no instant gratification. It's a long process. Even when there are big breakthroughs, it may be years before that becomes a new treatment. It doesn't happen fast, and fortunately, it's still fairly rare for kids to have cancer, and so most families, the majority of families, are not touched about childhood cancer, and so they don't completely understand how absolutely devastating it can be to a family. And then, of course, COVID has slowed it down dramatically. We had a big drop in our donations over the last 2 years. We're still doing okay because we have a lot of people. Marlee touched so many lives, and money seems to sometimes come out of nowhere. And this is another great story. I told you may have maybe stopped talking at some point, but we were lucky enough to have met a family that doesn't live far from us here in Colorado, whose son was diagnosed with ARMS. Then we got to know the parents, and for his birthday, his aunt did a Facebook fundraiser for his 5th birthday. He was turning 5. He raised $25,000 for Marlee Smile. We had a donor who heard about that, wants to remain anonymous, but said if he hits 25,000, I'll match it. And they matched it. And so sometimes money comes from places you don't expect, and they wanted all that money targeted to research. And so I kind of think of these 2 grants we're funding now, one we have funded and the one we're about to fund, are kind of like they're Davy's grants. Davy raised the money that's going to go to this research. And so sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's pennies from heaven. A lot of times it's just calling people, because we can't do events anymore, just like you guys. It's where you had the shaving events, and that's where most of your money came from. Now you're having to do virtual events. Kind of the same for us. We were planning on doing some golf tournaments and things, but all that had to stop. And we even stopped gifting bears for a while because we didn't want to get kids sick. That was our main concern. We didn't want to send a bear that could possibly have someone touch it with COVID or whatever. So for a long time, we didn't send them at all. Now we send them, but we have some protocols we go through before the bear actually gets to the child to make sure it's it's safe. And what was the second part of your question? Oh, how our challenges in funding research, because that was when you're a small foundation like we are, and we were asked by Marlee to fund research. We had to figure out how to do it, and we didn't want to just donate kind of generically to an organization that's doing cancer research. We really wanted it to be targeted to rhabdomyosarcoma or other pediatric sarcomas. And so I started looking around, and I got on St. Baldrick's website and read about it, and some other bigger foundations who have the apparatus and the infrastructure to vet projects, and the scientific advisory boards to make sure they're good projects. And the first thing I did, we made a donation to a hero fund, and I got a call from Susan the next day and said, if y'all are really serious about this, there is a better way for you to be able to do this and target the type of research you want to do, and that's to become an official partner and actually signing a partnership agreement with a minimum amount of funding we will do each year, which this year I think we're going to double. But it's been a great partnership because once you guys have vetted all of the grants, Susan will send us a list that she thinks we would be interested in, because she knows what we're interested in funding. We'll pick a few, take them to the board, and then that's how we choose which projects we fund. And we want to fund projects that we know have potential. And I know we're going to talk more about the Dream Team in a minute, but this gives us some confidence that these are vetted projects. They're some of the best that are out there because your scientific advisory board and others have reviewed them and said, yes, these are worth funding. They have potential. And we just picked the one we want to assist in funding. And that's what we do. We work through Susan to get the money to the right place. And it doesn't duplicate the administrative costs. That was one thing I was very concerned about. I didn't want to spend money setting up that kind of infrastructure. I wanted to avoid duplicating what's already out there, but still get the money to the place where our donors want it to go, to cure Marlee's cancer. That's why they're donating it to us. So that's where we want every dollar to go. We don't want it to go to administrative costs. We have no employees that are paid, but we have a lot of very dedicated and passionate volunteers that work with us. And so we don't spend any money or very little money on administrative costs. We try for all of it to go to bears and to research.
So one of the projects that you've spotted and that the project that you're supporting is the St. Baldrick Stand-Up Cancer Pediatric Cancer Dream Team, which has made unbelievable progress in combating multiple cancers by combining genomics and immunotherapy. And potential, they've really just started to scratch the potential, and the name Dream Team is so appropriate for them. Was there something else that you haven't mentioned that kind of drew you to this particular project?
I think that was the biggest part, was bringing genomics and immunology together, because Marlee had the CAR T-cell therapy, but it didn't have the robust genomic piece to it where they find markers from the tumors, proteins, or whatever it may be, so that they can program the CAR T cells to recognize the cancer cells, which is harder in pediatric patients than it is in adult patients. But I do think it's eventually going to be, at the very least, a much less toxic treatment for kids than chemotherapy. And I think, and this is just me, and I'm certainly not a scientist or a doctor, but I think there's going to be a period where we get to a place where cancer is a manageable disease that you can live with, kind of like diabetes or something else, because we have treatments that aren't so toxic that you die from the treatment. And that does happen. And so kids can live with cancer for a long period of time, getting immunotherapy that doesn't have those horrible toxic side effects, And then eventually I think we'll get to the cure piece. But I see this, and I think a lot of people do too, reading a lot of the literature. I certainly didn't come up with these ideas on my own. Like you said, I'm a finance guy. Um, I think that's probably the first step to a cure, is making it a manageable disease that people can live with for a long time.
Mhm.
And hopefully we get there soon. I think that's what drew me the most to, because they are hand in glove with the dream team between genomics and immunotherapy. And I see that as the future, and it's really exciting. We were able to help fund the research at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia that is now spun off a clinical trial that's going to start at Stanford along these same lines, specifically for rhabdomyosarcoma. It's going to start soon, and we're going to assist in funding that project as well, and that is extremely exciting for us.
What you've said is so important, and I really want to kind of underscore something so that our audience hears it. When you burn, which is radiation, when you cut, surgery, or poison cancer, which is chemotherapy, it leaves scars. But when you do any of those things in a child whose body and mind is still developing, the scars manifest very soon, and it affects the entirety of your life. And immunotherapy held so much promise, and we're all, like you said, rightly excited about the potential, and just need to get as much support as possible to the Dream Team and other projects utilizing immunotherapy, so that we can give every researcher a new weapon to treat cancer with, and a more effective and kinder, gentler weapon. Bill, I know that part of why you partnered with St. Baldrick's was, and you intimated this, was the opportunity to keep researchers at patients' bedside, physician scientists at bedside, or in the labs, and not having to be out fundraising all the time to support their research to keep it going. What advice would you offer to other parents who are thinking of creating a charitable organization to fight their child's disease?
Yeah, I mean, there's many, many of them out there, because we all do want to have something to remember our children's legacy after they've passed away, especially from something like cancer that's normally a long, tough journey. Excuse me. And I have a very good friend whose daughter was passionate about water wells in Africa, and so they raise money and build water wells in Africa. And I have another good friend who built a baseball field in his son's name because he loved baseball, and it's magical to see now the kids out playing baseball on that field. But there are literally hundreds and hundreds of small foundations like us who are set up in memory of kids who've passed away from cancer, who want to fund research just like we did, but haven't necessarily found a good way to do it. And this is an easy, good way to fund childhood cancer. And if we could aggregate all of these dollars from these small foundations like ours, it could be really, really big dollars. If we were all focused in the same direction, doing the same thing, if that's part of their mission, is to fund research, then this is a great way to do it. And the more of us that can do it like this, it doesn't increase the cost, but it does increase the money available for research. And I would recommend anyone who has a small foundation and is interested in doing childhood cancer research to reach out to Susan or someone at St. Baldrick's and talk about the partnership that can give you the freedom you want to be able to choose the kind of research your dollars want to go to and our donors' dollars want to go to, without creating a lot more cost or really any more costs. And so I looked at other large foundations, and honestly, St. Baldrick's, it turned out to be a great decision. We looked at a lot and decided on St. Baldrick's, and it's just been a great relationship, working with Susan to pick projects, and it's so seamless and it's so easy to do, and we appreciate that.
Well, thank you for that plug, Bill. And I'm going to go ahead and build on that and just say it's Susan Hurd, my esteemed colleague,
Yeah.
susan.hurd at stbaldricks.org. Bill, what do you think Marlee would say about the progress you've made thus far?
I think she'd be very excited. And honestly, we're shocked at the progress we've made this far. We're less than 3 years in existence, and we're about to fund our third research project. We honestly didn't think we would be funding research in probably till our fifth year or so. But we've been fortunate. That you mentioned Build-A-Bear earlier. Build-A-Bear has gifted us a lot of bears, along with the Gaylord Texan in Dallas and some other big donors. So we have a big inventory of bears, which has freed us up to use the other donors' money to fund research sooner than we thought we'd be able to. So I think she would be really happy of what we're doing and proud that we've made so much progress in such a short amount of time. But it's really because of her. It's not because of us. She touched so many lives when she was alive, and she still does today. People who never met her still understand her legacy and support it, and it amazes me every day.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bill, and for the great work that your family and all of your donors and volunteers at Marlee Smile are doing to help so many kids who are fighting as Marlee did. It's really impressive and moving.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to talk to you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. And thanks to you, our audience, for tuning in. Please share Marlee's story on your social networks to help Marlee Smile reach more kids just in time for Thanksgiving and the holidays. And be sure to tune in December 9th for our next episode when we speak with Dr. Joseph Lubega about building the first pediatric cancer program in East Africa. Have a wonderful and healthy Thanksgiving. That was beautiful. I'm